Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host for this behind-the-scenes look at PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. Here we talk to the key players at PETA and the movement and ask them about how animal rights change their lives and how they stay motivated to make the world a better place for the animals. On today's episode, Dogs in Chains, and how PETA saves them with its unique sheltering policy.
Our program is very unique because we are an open admission private shelter. We never charge a fee to accept animals. We never turn animals away. We don't have a waiting list. And we don't make it difficult for people to surrender animals who might have issues that make them unadoptable. We also offer a service to people in our community who have animals whose time has come and who cannot afford to have their animals euthanized at a vet clinic, which is hundreds of dollars.
Daphna Nachminovich, PETA's Sr.VP of Cruelty Investigation, also oversees PETA's low-cost spay-neuter clinics and PETA's Community Animal Project, PETA's CAP program. It's a program that seeks to make the life of thousands of neglected dogs a little better, especially those found chained up who live outdoors 100% of the time. Nachminovich talks about PETA's unique and ideal sheltering philosophy, which exposes why no-kill shelters, which are always full and turn away animals, are more sham than humane. Unlike a no-kill shelter, PETA doesn't turn any animal away. It's the reason some call PETA's shelter in the Norfolk, Virginia area the shelter of last resort. My conversation with PETA's Daphna Nachminovich, but first, thanks again for joining us for this episode of the PETA Podcast. Please share a link with your friends and let them know the animals have a voice on the PETA Podcast. Go to our webpage at PETA.org and listen to all the episodes, including the first episode with PETA President and co-founder Ingrid Newkirk. And there's another with Daphna where she talks about the Cruelty Investigations Division's greatest hits, where whistleblowers have come forward on behalf of animals in distress. You can also listen to all our episodes on Apple Podcasts. And while you're there, rate and review the show. It helps the algorithm know that PETA has a podcast on the issues important to you. And don't forget you can always help by hitting that Donate Now button at PETA.org. And if you're high-tech and have Amazon's Alexa, it's as easy as saying, Alexa, donate to PETA. And now to our episode, where Daphna Nachminovich, PETA's Senior VP of Cruelty Investigations, talks about another area of her concern, PETA's Community Animal Project, and the services it provides to neglected dogs within 2 hours of PETA's headquarters in Norfolk, Virginia. On this episode of the PETA Podcast.
It's a program that allows us to serve animals who have been forgotten, who are not respected, and whose lot in life is, a tiny patch of dirt at the end of a heavy chain, eating, urinating, defecating, sleeping, sitting, existing in that same patch of land, second after second, minute after minute, hour after hour, day after day. So we, our ultimate goal is to ban the chaining of dogs and the outdoor keeping of dogs. And so we work on that ultimate goal jurisdiction by jurisdiction while we serve these individual dogs in order to make their lives a little brighter.
Well, tell me, what do you and your field workers see out there on a typical day? And tell me about an image or a specific case that you often go back to or think about as a motivating factor why you continue to do what you do.
I'll give you an example, a recent example involving two female pit bull dogs, Gigi and Princess, who lived in a very tiny, tiny town named Boykins in Virginia. Boykins is in Southampton County, which is probably about an hour and a half from here. And Gigi and Princess were brought to our attention in December of 2013. They both existed in a pen in the backyard of this home in Boykins. Gigi was tethered in the pen, and then the pen itself was maybe a 10 by 10 pen, a small pen, And we had visited these dogs since December of 2013, and without exception, we would show up to try and, give them some attention and some straw or maybe clean their area. The pen was kept locked, so it wasn't a situation where we could just go in and, tend to them. And the people were unfriendly, not home, or just generally, basically, doing us a favor by allowing us to do what they should have been doing. And so for years, we'd gone to them, tried to talk sense into them. We called authorities a couple of times. That didn't do anything. And so finally in August, I went out in the field, which I don't get to do as much as I'd like to or as much as I used to. And I had gone by, and it's not just these dogs are in a pen. I mean, just to paint the picture, is that these dogs are in a pen that nobody goes into for any reason. So they have now, you have two, 50-pound or so dogs who have been defecating everywhere, so much so that they've started defecating on top of their doghouse, which is a doghouse we gave them a couple of years ago in an effort to make friends with these people. So this tiny 10 by 10 pen is taken up, maybe a fourth of it is taken up by this doghouse. And now the top of the doghouse is covered in feces. One of the dogs is tethered in the pen, so she can't really get very far. The only other shelter in the pen is this tiny little flimsy, pathetic little plastic doghouse that's on its side. The dogs for water have this sort of blackish, greenish sludge, and the food that they had been given, who knows how many days ago, is thrown on the ground. So, needless to say, it's contaminated with their feces. And these dogs are
Well, where are the owners here? Where are the owners here?
the owner. So the woman who's the owners live the woman who owned the dogs per se was not even a resident of that particular house, but her mother lived there. So we call the police. The police comes out. Long story short, we did get her charged, but they didn't feel that they had enough grounds to seize these poor dogs. And so while this woman was facing cruelty charges, these two dogs were kept in, continued to be kept in this disgusting pen. And over the course of weeks and months, we would keep check on them and finally called the police again and said, we think they're not being tended to. And the tragedy of all of it is that one of the dogs ended up dying. And then that's what finally prompted the police to seize the second dog. And so this poor dog who ended up dying died of heartworm disease, hookworm infestation that caused colitis, which is essentially a prolapse um, of her rear end. So they seized her remains, they seized the surviving dogs, and by much pressure, they allowed us to house the surviving dogs. And we finally had a custody hearing where the judge, this scumbag, didn't even bother to show up. So we got custody of this dog who is now at our placement partner, the Virginia Beach SPCA here in Virginia Beach. And she's doing, despite her years and years of neglect, emotional and physical, and just a complete lack of socialization, this dog has really passed every temperament test with flying colors, and she's up for adoption finally and doing very well. And this woman is facing multiple charges of cruelty, and her trial will be in January. And we will push very, very, very hard for the judge to prohibit her from having any animals ever again.
So this, yeah, that's what that one case.
That's one case, that's one case. Very hard. We visit thousands of dogs like this, and most of them are chained, not penned. But at the end of the day, they're all neglected. So it's education by example. It's providing services that benefit the dogs and educate the people. And it's ultimately getting dogs off of chains if we can, getting dogs given to us if we can, and if they're adoptable and can have a chance for a home, then we place them ourselves or we transfer them to one of our placement partners here in Hampton Roads. But it's a vital program because it alleviates the suffering of so many animals. And
So you talk about placement partners. So PETA isn't a shelter or doesn't have cages or kennels.
yes, we are absolutely a shelter under the law in Virginia. We are not a traditional shelter in that we do not use cages or crates. We have guest rooms. So we have a number of guest rooms that are modified office is essentially in our Sam Simon Center in Norfolk, Virginia. And the guest rooms are equipped with dimmable lighting and a sofa and a radio. And animals do get, for example, Princess from Boykins was in one of our guest rooms for about 2 weeks before we transferred her to the Virginia Beach SPCA because the custody was, we were temporarily allowed to house her. We didn't want her to sit at the pound at the county. It's a very primitive structure.
Wow, this sounds like a hotel room.
Yes. The guest rooms all have an armchair or a sofa, dimmable lighting, a radio, depending on who we put in there, some beds and scratching posts and things like that. But we use no cages or crates for animals whatsoever. It's very nice. In fact, when we have visitors come, one of our rooms, which is more of a long-term housing room, has a beautiful view of the Elizabeth River, and I've had multiple people ask if they could work from there full time. So it is very nice.
And PETA is the only one who does this sort of thing? I mean,
Our program is very unique because we are an open admission private shelter. We never charge a fee to accept animals. We never turn animals away. We don't have a waiting list. And we don't make it difficult for people to surrender animals who might have issues that make them unadoptable. We also offer a service to people in our community who have animals whose time has come and who cannot afford to have their animals euthanized at a vet clinic, which is hundreds of dollars. So this very, very unique and wonderful service enables people to be with their animals when when their animal's last minute has come. And that means so much to people, and it certainly means so much to the animals to have their families with them.
and no other program exists like this out there in that area or any. How does this compare with other operations?
Well, I mean, our program is very unique in that we never turn animals away. We are not when it comes to private shelters in this area, and unfortunately, more and more everywhere, animals are taken in only if they're adoptable or are going to be easily placed. And so what happens is that animals who are rejected by limited admission or restricted admission shelters have nowhere to go except for the open admission shelters if there is one in their locality. Our program is very unique because we take in all of, when a chain dog like Princess, for example, is given to us, that's a dog who's going to require some rehabilitation. She needs heartworm treatment. She needed to be treated for parasites. She has a mammary tumor that needs to be taken off. Those are all things that we're going to subsidize at the Virginia Beach SPCA. So we have this really precious collaboration that allows us to funnel the adoptable or potentially adoptable animals that we take in off of chains and pens and disgusting, lonely backyards to either to our own adoption program or to placement partners that we collaborate with and subsidize veterinary care for those individual animals that we've rescued.
We've talked about all these things you've done under the investigations department, under this community program, that the community animal project that you direct. Tell me about what all this work means to you personally and how it's affected you over the years as you see what good your work has done.
Well, I mean, the biggest thing everything means to me that we do, not just in PETA's cruelty investigations department, but at PETA. PETA is there for animals, whether they are specific individual animals we hear about in need in the middle of the night, or they are animals we know exist on a factory farm. What it means to me is that those animals are going to get help because people call us about them. The one thing that always makes me so proud is that we are, part of the other reason that we are unique is that we have a 24-hour pager system that's both local and national. And so anyone who is concerned about an animal at any given time can give us a call if, say, authorities didn't come through for that animal. And that might mean an animal we hear about in the middle of the night here locally, and we drive out and pick up that animal and provide that animal with a humane death. Or it might mean that our emergency response team, which is the national aspect of the Cruelty Investigations Department that responds to cruelty calls from all over the world, liaises with law enforcement and a veterinarian in the middle of the night to get help to that animal. So for me, the biggest thing is just knowing that we are here. We are here and we're going to answer that call.
I mean, the fact that you do all this work, though, you're exposed to a lot of suffering, as are your workers. When you go out in the field, as you look at things at your office, videotapes from investigations, how do you and your workers cope with all the suffering that you see?
Well, I mean, I think a sense of humor never hurts. I think that all of us have learned, over the years that the things that happen to animals out there are going to happen regardless of whether we see them or not, and that we have to learn how to see them and keep our eye on the prize without, uh, you know, breaking down so that those animals can get help. Because for us to see what we see really is not comparison to what the animal is going through. And those animals depend on us. It's a big responsibility. And, we are here to carry that burden so that those animals can get help. So, it's not easy and you have to learn how to cope. Some people work out. Some people, eat sweets or go to the movies or, whatever they need to do in order to stay, um, on their toes and as effective as they can possibly be and prevent themselves from burning out. But at the end of the day, I mean, all the people that work in our cruelty investigations department, whether they're undercover field observers or our evidence analysts, our field workers, our cruelty case workers, everybody, everybody is here because they can wake up in the morning and know that they're going to do their best to make the world a better place and that they might help an individual animal or 10 individual animals. They're going to educate the public. They're going to do something meaningful. And at the end of the day, the world will be just a little bit kinder than it was at 8 o'clock in the morning. And that's motivation. I mean, you don't, you know, I, a lot of the folks that work, I myself too came from a shelter background, and you have to really, I think a lot of us think, well, this would happen regardless of or not of whether I see it. And the fact that I see it just means that I can do something about it. And that's why I'm here. I'm not here to feel bad or feel sorry for myself. I'm here to make it so that things get better. And, if there are people who can't cope, then they usually don't survive in this particular department.
Yeah. And you're at it every day, and sometimes things are the same, like when you see those thousands of dogs, many of which are chained there in your area, or if you go into an investigative situation like a lab. So there's some similarity there, but you also respond to massive news events like hurricanes in Texas and Puerto Rico recently. And that was under your purview. And PETA's website show a lot of the photos and video about what PETA workers did. Tell me about how how PETA went into action during the hurricanes in Texas and Puerto Rico.
We jumped into action after Harvey. It was extremely worrisome to see the images, and obviously, when disaster strikes, unfortunately, animals are not at the top of the list for disaster for the usual responders. And so we sent a team down to Texas. We sent two vans and a boat in tow to the Houston area. We actually worked in Port Arthur, and we were able to not just I mean, we helped so many animals and so many people whose animals were stranded. Um, you know, animals who were left chained or penned in backyards, animals who were left crated in a home that had flooded, chickens whose pens and hutches had flooded that we were able to move to higher ground, even an armadillo who was stranded in a puddle, like, with just one little patch of grass that we moved to a safe spot. And we were able to form a relationship with the Port Arthur Animal Control Authority and assist the animal control officer, who was extremely overwhelmed, understandably so, with caring for the animals at the shelter. and responding to calls from people who said, my animal is still trapped in my house. I know one call they responded to, there were 3 dogs in a garage, and the dogs had, climbed on top of the cars in the garage. And they really were able to bring, kittens, chickens, and dogs to safety. And then we came back, our teams came back up with 60 some animals for placement that we shared with other shelters in our area. So we were able to, these were animals who were in shelters before the hurricane. And so the shelters needed to make room for incoming. So we were able to take those animals out and, bring them up here so that the shelters down there could make more room for incoming flood victims. So it was extremely gratifying. And then our team leader and a couple of other team members didn't have much rest because Hurricane Maria meant that they, went to Puerto Rico, which actually wasn't so easy to do. I thought our team leader was so anxious to get to Puerto Rico, I thought she was just going to start swimming. But we did eventually charter a plane, and we flew our team down there, and we spent about 2 weeks in Puerto Rico, helping animals we found on the street, but mostly helping animal shelters that we found down there who were completely overwhelmed, damaged. So we helped them clean, not just cages, but debris, and you provide fresh water and food and take animals for veterinary care. And we chartered a plane back and then we came back with almost a dozen dogs that some of them we placed ourselves, and some of them went to our area shelter partners. So,
but no hedgehogs.
No hedgehogs. No hedgehogs. We know who to call though if we find hedgehogs.
But also here's the other thing, the sobering fact that, despite all the work you did, you had to come home at some point and there was still much more to be done, right? So it must have been sad that, when do you call it a day and say, okay, we got to head back?
That's a great question. That's a great question. In Puerto Rico, it was extremely difficult because you could stay in Puerto Rico forever. And frankly, you could have done that. We could have been overwhelmed in Puerto Rico before the hurricane hit because there's a massive overpopulation and homelessness crisis there. And we are in touch with the shelters that we assisted, and we are trying to assess how best we can help moving forward. But that's a very good question. I think at some point you try to assess, are we vital? Are we vital? Have we sort of stabilized the situations that we've found? And as I told, our team, for the animals we serve here locally, every day is a disaster, and we need people here too. So it's easy to want to, go help where a disaster has just struck. But we do have many, many disasters happen locally here. And for the poor chained dogs that we serve every day is a disaster. So it's not as if they're coming back to rest. They're coming back to work for different animals.
Daphna Nachminovich, PETA's Senior VP of Cruelty Investigations, on the other work she leads, the Community Animal Project and the disaster projects like the recent one to save animals in Puerto Rico. To find out more and to help the effort, go to PETA.org. And that's our show for today. Contact us at PETA.org. You can find me on Twitter at Emil Guillermo. Once again, thank you for listening. Check out all our episodes on Apple Podcasts, where you can rate and review the show. It helps get the word out about the issues you care about. And don't forget, you can help the animals and PETA, especially if you have Amazon's Alexa. Just say, Alexa, donate to PETA. Our music is provided by Carbonworks. Check them out on YouTube. And join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo.